வணக்கம். இது தமிழ்குரலின் மெய்ப்பட பேசு. இன்றைய சிறப்பு விருந்தினர் தொடர்ந்து சமூகம் சார்ந்து பல்வேறு நிலைகளில் ஆர்டிஐ என்று சொல்லக்கூடிய ரைட் டு இன்ஃபர்மேஷன் அந்த ஆக்ட்ல பல்வேறு விதமான உண்மைகளை வெளிக்கொண்டு வரக்கூடியவர். சமீபத்தில் எலக்டோரல் பாண்ட் என்று சொல்லக்கூடிய தேர்தல் பத்திர விதிமுறைகள் அது சார்ந்த விஷயங்களில் ரொம்ப தீவிரமாக பல உண்மைகளை வெளிக்கொண்டு வந்தவர். We have most eminent activist who is working for the grounds of accountability and transparency across all domains. Madam Anjali Bharadwaj is joining us. Hello, ma'am. Welcome and thanks for joining us, ma'am.
Thank you for having me.
Ma'am, the news which has been into debates for the past 24 hours, SBI has refused to enclose the standard operating procedure which you have been asked through the RTI query. What was the actual thing which you have been raised for, and what was the actual response, and how do you perceive it, ma'am?
Yes, as you know, the whole electoral bond scheme and the 4 laws that were amended to facilitate bringing in this scheme has been declared unconstitutional. All of these things have been declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of India. The Supreme Court basically said that the electoral bond scheme was a violation of people's right to information. As voters, we have a right to know who is funding which political party, because when large corporates fund parties, it's usually with the expectation of a quid pro quo, that if they give money, then the parties will make policies for them in their favor, laws, the ruling party might give them contracts that they desire. So all of this is very important for citizens to know when they go to cast their vote. So the court said that the electoral bond scheme, which basically anonymized the source of funding to political parties and made it completely non-transparent, was a violation of voters' right to know, people's fundamental right to information. So Article 19(1) of the Constitution was violated, and therefore the court said that this scheme be struck down. The court also said that retrospectively, from 12th April 2019, all information about who bought the electoral bonds and who donated electoral bonds, along with the denomination and the date of electoral bonds, should be made public. And the court also asked the SBI, the State Bank of India, which was the designated bank to transact electoral bonds, to put out the bond numbers. Each electoral bond had a hidden alphanumeric code written on it, which could only be seen in the ultraviolet light. So the court said that also put out information on the unique alphanumeric number, bond number, so that people can actually see who bought that bond and which party did they give that bond to. Now all of that information is in the public domain, and people are studying that information. Investigative journalists are looking at it, interested citizens are looking at that information, and they are trying to establish a quid pro quo to see whether there were electoral bonds that were given to a political party by someone who then benefited in a close proximity from that ruling party if the bond was given to a ruling party. Now, all of this is very, very important, but in the background, one important thing that came up was that the SBI first said that our SOP, our standard operating procedure, sort of demanded anonymity, and we wanted to anonymize the name of the donor and the identity of the donor and who's donating to which political party. Because if you remember, when the electoral bonds were brought in, the then finance minister, Mr. Arun Jaitley, said very clearly in Parliament and even outside that the purpose of these anonymous bonds was that people who wanted to donate and usually do not want their name to be known because they're scared that if there is a different party that gets to know that they are donating to a particular party, they might get vindictive. So they want anonymity, and because they don't have anonymity through the banking channels, they donate money in cash. So the whole idea and the rationale behind bringing electoral bonds was that it will help people who want to donate in the banking channels to be able to get anonymity. They can donate without fear through the banking channels. They don't have to resort to donating through cash. Now, what that would mean is that there will have to be proper anonymity maintained in the whole system so that that could not be tampered with. The basic scheme of the could not be, the integrity of the scheme could not be tampered with. Now, in order to do that, the finance ministry said very clearly in a communication that it put out, the finance ministry put out a clear communication in 2018 saying that the alphanumeric unique code will not be registered anywhere while noting down the donors and the purchaser side. So what that means is that even by mistake, or somebody wanted to tamper with it, they could not find out and track the bonds through these unique alphanumeric numbers. So the finance ministry put out this press note in which they clarified that we are not going to be, the SBI will not be recording on the purchaser and the redeeming side the alphanumeric number, and therefore the alphanumeric number cannot be used to track who is giving money through electoral bonds to whom. Now, when the information has come out, after the Supreme Court judgment, it is very clear that the SBI has been recording these alphanumeric unique numbers on both the purchaser and the redeemer side, and which is why we are able to track this today, which means that the SBI could have been able to track this the whole time. Now, the point is, the big question that arises is that if the finance ministry had claimed, had stated very clearly that the SBI is not going to track and the SBI is not going to record using these alphanumeric numbers, then how was the SBI doing this? Was the SBI doing this illegally? Was the SBI doing this under direction from the ruling party? Because we have to understand that under the electoral bond scheme, neither citizens knew who was giving money to whom through electoral bonds, nor did the opposition parties know. But if this tracking was being done by the SBI, then the SBI, which is a government bank, would have known who was buying the electoral bonds and giving to whom, which meant that the ruling party would have known. Now, this really destroys the level playing field, because if you think about it, the most important situation here is that the ruling party, which controls the enforcement directorate, which controls the CBI, and can actually go after donors if they are donating to opposition parties. If they get to know, then the whole purpose of anonymity goes. So this SOP, therefore, the standard operating procedure, became very important for people to know. These are guidelines that the SBI would have issued to all its branches where electoral bonds were being bought and sold, to be able to tell them what should be recorded, what should not be recorded. And if in that it is clear that they were not supposed to record the alphanumeric unique code on the purchaser and the redeemer side, then the big question arises that who was directing them to do this, under whose direction was this being done, and was the tracking of the bonds being shared with the ruling party at the center?
Yeah, what I could understand is the entire process of electoral bond from sales to redemption. The system is neither genuine to the citizens on their right to know, as well as they are not genuine to the corporates who are ensured anonymity as well. I can put it in such a way. Ma'am, here arises the next question. How can SBI can defend secrecy over I can say over a law or an act which is declared unconstitutional? Secrecy over an unconstitutional law, it has been something they are messing it up, I can say. What would be your next step for the IT reply, ma'am, legally?
Yes. So let me first say one more thing, which I think is very important in this context. See, this is not just about the integrity of the scheme in terms of it being sort of, letting down the corporates. This is really about the level playing field in a democracy. What was happening through the electoral bond scheme was that opposition parties and the citizens were in the dark about who was donating bonds to whom. But the ruling party would have been the only one to know who was giving money through bonds to which party. So technically, if the SBI was in violation of what the finance ministry is saying, doing this tracking, then it is very important to understand that when we are going into elections, the level playing field in our democracy has been destroyed, because then the ruling party would have known who is getting funds from whom, and they could have easily acted on that information. So I think it's very important to understand how this is a big blow to our democracy, to the entire electoral process. Now, the issue which you have raised on the right to information, you're absolutely right that the Supreme Court has said that this kind of anonymity is totally wrong in a democracy, and they have struck down the electoral bond scheme. And yet, the process by which electoral bonds were being sold, they were being redeemed, that entire guidelines, the SBI is still refusing to share information with citizens on. It's very important that at least now citizens have full information. When the Supreme Court has said that this is unconstitutional, people have a right to know about the electoral bond scheme. It is very shocking why the SBI today is denying information and denying the SOP, the standard operating procedure. What is it hiding? You see, that becomes a big question then. That is it hiding something? Is it was it doing something wrong that it is not wanting to share? Otherwise, there is no reason why, when everything is out in the public domain, the SOP should be secret. And if you look at the clause, the exemption clause that is being used under the Right to Information Act, Section 8 deals with exemptions. It deals with what is the information that cannot be given to citizens. So, under Section 8, they have quoted Section 8(1)(d), which basically deals with commercial interest and harm to commercial interests of the third party. Now, what the SBI has done, it is that it has very blandly invoked this particular provision, clause, Section 8(1)(d), to deny information without explaining how sharing the SOP of sale and redemption of electoral bonds, how that will harm the competitive interest or the commercial interest of a third party. So this is certainly appearing to be an illegal denial, and therefore we will be moving a challenge, an appeal against this decision of the CPIO of the SBI.
So probably it will be an extended battle, I can say, because it was a very longer battle from the time when electoral bond were introduced, was people have been keep on doing for bringing transparency, and there have been a longer struggle, and it is said to continue, I can say. Ma'am, recently you have, along with a couple of eminent activists, you have demanded for a Supreme Court monitored probe into the entire electoral bond scheme, actually. Can you please give a more gist and demands, and what is the need for that particular probe?
Well, so far we have not moved the court demanding a probe, but yes, what we have been saying is that the information that has come out very clearly shows certain trends which are very concerning. The Supreme Court itself, in its ruling, had said very clearly that electoral bonds, when they are given in this manner, behind a veil of secrecy, would typically be very problematic, because large companies basically give money to political parties, especially to ruling parties, with an expectation of a quid pro quo. What we can see happening now is that, if we look at the data that has been put out by the Election Commission of India, it is showing that certain companies were giving large amounts of money through electoral bonds to ruling parties, and then getting large contracts in a very close proximity of giving those electoral bonds. So, either very soon before or after they gave electoral bonds, they got very large projects from governments. Now, this could potentially show a kickback, where it would show that these companies wanted contracts. Potentially, they were paying this money to the ruling party to be able to get those contracts. But to be able to actually say something conclusively, this needs a very, very clear probe, an investigation. The investigation should be by an independent investigating agency. So that is very clear. The other thing which the data is showing, that there are many companies who were under the scanner of the ED or the CBI or the IT department. There were raids in many cases that were being conducted against these companies by the ED, CBI, and the IT department. And around that time, these companies gave electoral bonds to the ruling party at the center, the BJP. Now, the big question that arises is that, is one of the two things happening. One is that money is being given to a company is doing something wrong, and is money being given with the expectation that the probe will stop, that the EDCBI will stop raiding them, will put it in a cold storage or finish the case, or were these agencies being used by the central government to extort money from these companies? These are the two possibilities that arise. And therefore, to be able to examine this, a clear investigation is required, because what we are able to see from the data are trends. What we are able to see from the data is the possibility of this happening. But to get to the bottom of it, we require a probe. Now, this probe clearly cannot be done by the ED or the CBI, because they themselves, their role is under question. So we need a proper investigation, which should ideally be done by an SIT, by setting up an SIT which should be court monitored, so that we citizens get to know the truth. There is a proper investigation, and then if there is any wrongdoing, then action can be taken against it.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. That was a bit longer conversation, but a lot of things, lot of inputs and insights which you have been working on, and your consistent working towards ensuring accountability and transparency in public life. It's really a huge thing, and we are sending more wishes from people of Tamil Nadu. On behalf of the people of Tamil Nadu, a long way to go, and all the best for your further things, ma'am. Thanks a lot. Thanks for sharing your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.